When we stop listening, we stop learning. When we stop learning, we stop growing. And when we stop growing, we start dying. Not physically, but intellectually and emotionally. Welcome to the Kindness Extremist Podcast. I'm your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa. I've spoken to tens of thousands of people all over the world about the importance of kindness. And I am obsessed with how we can bring more kindness into our daily lives and restore balance to a deeply unbalanced world. Every episode, I'll give you 3 practical strategies to create a kinder world, and I'll do it in 30 minutes or less. No fluff, just valuable, actionable content that you can implement in your life immediately after listening to help you actively create a kinder world. There's no time to waste. Let's dive in. Welcome back to episode 26 of the Kindness Extremist Podcast. I'm your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa, and I am so pumped to dive into today's highly requested topic with you, critical thinking. Now, before we dive in, let me ask you something. When was the last time you completely changed your mind about something important? I'm talking about a real belief shift, not just switching from Coke to Pepsi or something like that, but an actual, hold up a second, I think I've been wrong about this type of moment. If you're struggling to come up with an answer, you're not alone. Most of us rarely change our minds about anything meaningful, and that's a real problem, especially in this day and age. Not because we should be wishy-washy about our beliefs, because our refusal to think critically about our own thinking is literally tearing the world apart. To ensure that we're operating from the same definition here, in its simplest terms, critical thinking is the ability to effectively analyze information to form a well-reasoned judgment. Or in other words, it's thinking about our thinking. In real talk, my friend, I believe that becoming more self-aware about how we think is one of the most powerful acts of kindness that we can offer to our world right now. Here's why this matters. When we think better, we communicate better. When we communicate better, we connect better. And when we connect better, we can create a kinder world. It is that simple and it's that important. So in today's episode, I'm going to share 3 powerful critical thinking strategies that can transform not just how you process information, but also how you engage with the people who see the world differently than you do. There's so much to cover in this episode, and as always, each section will include a practical takeaway that you can start using immediately, because knowledge without action is just entertainment, and we've got way too much work to do, fam, on these streets to merely settle for entertainment. Let's get to it. Allow me to share this powerful quote from the poet Charles Bukowski. He said, quote, "The problem with the world is that intelligent people are full of doubts, while the stupid ones are full of confidence," end quote. Now, obviously, I'm not calling anyone stupid because, that wouldn't be on brand as a kindness extremist who's also known as Brother Teresa. However, though, Mr. Bukowski's observation hits at something pretty profound. We both know the type of people who are always wrong but never in doubt. You know what I mean? Needless to say, they are exhausting to be around. On the other hand, though, the smartest people that I know are the ones who say, I could be wrong about this, more often than anyone else. And this is the first critical thinking skill that I want to address in this episode, intellectual humility. Intellectual humility is about having the courage and, yes, the intelligence to acknowledge that our knowledge is incomplete and that our beliefs might be incorrect. Let me share what intellectual humility actually looks like in practice. Researchers at Duke University developed something amazing called the General Intellectual Humility Scale. They asked people to rate themselves on how closely these 6 statements describe them. And as I share them with you right now, dear listener, rate yourself on how closely these 6 statements describe you. 1, I question my own opinions, positions, and viewpoints because they could be wrong. 2, I reconsider my opinions when presented with new evidence. 3, I recognize the value in opinions that are different from my own. 4, I accept that my beliefs and attitudes may be wrong. 5, in the face of conflicting evidence, I am open to changing my opinions. And 6, I like finding out new information that differs from what I already think is true. Okay, my friend. So how'd you do? Be real with me, but more importantly, be real with yourself. If you're like most people, including me, when I first encountered these statements, you probably realize you have some work to do. The people who score high on this test are not only the most refreshing human beings in our workplaces, in our communities, and in our lives, but they're often the kindest people too. Specifically speaking, they're the ones who can admit when they're wrong. They're the ones who seek information rather than validation. Most of all, they're the ones who are curious, open-minded, and critically think using logic rather than their feelings. Wouldn't our workplaces, our communities, and our world be a much better place if more people thought like this? Here's the problem though. Do you feel it? I know you feel it. It's that tempting urge to say, yeah, Shola, this is great and all, but what about my coworker, Greg? He's the least intellectually humble person on earth. You need to tell this to him. No, I don't. You and I need to hear this way more than your boy, Greg. It is so easy to assume that everyone else is the problem while letting ourselves off the hook. Most people, including myself and many people listening to me right now, could do way better when it comes to consistently practicing intellectual humility. Not to mention, do you really think that we have the luxury or indulgence to wait for people like Greg to lead the charge towards intellectual humility and creating a kinder world? Nah, fam, it has to be us. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people like Greg in the world. The problem that's plaguing their thinking is something that I call certainty addiction. And it's the literal opposite of intellectual humility. You know these people. They're absolutely certain about everything, from the best way to load a dishwasher to the most complex geopolitical issues on earth. These folks have never met a belief they weren't 100% confident about. And as mentioned, these people are exhausting to be around. Certainty addiction is destroying our ability to have productive conversations. When we're addicted to being right, we stop listening. And guess what? When we stop listening, we stop learning. When we stop learning, we stop growing. And when we stop growing, we start dying. Not physically, but intellectually and emotionally. But here's the beautiful thing about intellectual humility. It's learnable. You can develop it like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it gets. And on that note, here's the first of my 3 practical kindness strategies of this episode. This week, I want you to try a daily doubt practice. Yes, you heard that right, my friend. For each day this week, I want you to formally start doubting yourself. Every day this week, identify one belief or one opinion you hold strongly and ask yourself this simple question. Is it possible that I can be wrong about this? Please don't go for the easy stuff like whether or not pineapple is an appropriate topping to put on a pizza. It's not, by the way. All right, I'm kidding. Sort of. Okay, jokes aside, I want you to pick something meaningful. Your political views, your opinion about a colleague, your stance on a social issue, your beliefs about parenting, whatever. The goal isn't to abandon your beliefs. It is to do the uncommon work of thinking about your beliefs more critically. Try this practice for just 1 week, and I guarantee you'll start noticing a shift in how you engage with information, how you think, and even with people you disagree with. Look, my friend, I get it. There might be a part of you that's still thinking, why do I have to be the one who does this daily doubt practice when so many people are unwilling to do the same? My friend, I feel you. And yes, it can be frustrating to have to constantly be the adult in the room. But what's the alternative? Spending your free time trying to school hateful trolls on social media? Recklessly arguing with your aunt for hours when she shares her problematic views at the next extended family gathering? Yes, and hear me when I say this. Sometimes you will need to check someone thoughtfully, kindly, and firmly. And I address how to do that in episodes 3 and 4 of this podcast. Still though, one often overlooked thing that we also need to do is model the power of critical thinking. By modeling curiosity, nuanced thinking, and the willingness to be less judgmental, ideally, we can slowly open the minds of others to consider doing the same thing. As Gandhi wisely said, be the change you want to see in the world. There's a reason why this iconic quote has stood the test of time. It's because it works. Real talk, my friend, critical thinking isn't easy. If it was easy, then everyone on earth would be doing it. But as we both know, that's not the case. That's why it's up to you and to me to lean into the important work of critical thinking, and it starts with intellectual humility. Okay, now that we've got the first critical thinking skill covered, let's dive into critically thinking about how we form our opinions in the first place. Years ago, I had a conversation with a former neighbor of mine who was absolutely convinced that a particular neighborhood in our city was dangerous. She wouldn't drive through it. She wouldn't shop or eat there. She wouldn't even consider stopping to fill up her gas tank in that area. When I asked her why, she said, everyone knows it's not safe there. Really? Everyone? So when I pressed her for specifics, she mentioned a crime that she heard about in the news 2 years earlier. Yes, 2 years ago. Yes, she based her perception of an entire neighborhood on one news story from 2 years ago. Sadly, this is how most of us form our opinions, and it's terrifying when you think about it. We collect random bits of information, a news headline here, social media post there, something our cousin's friend said at a barbecue, and we call it research. Then we build entire systems on this foundation of intellectual quicksand. It's madness. The second critical thinking skill that we need to develop is the ability to question our assumptions and examine how we formed our opinions in the first place. This is actually harder than it sounds because our brains are constantly taking shortcuts to help us process the overwhelming amount of information that we encounter every day. The problem is that most of us actually never question the assumptions underlying our beliefs. We build entire worldviews on foundations we've never examined, like constructing a house on land we've never tested for stability. Let me give you a framework for questioning assumptions that have been very helpful for me in how I approach complex issues. I call it the assumption audit approach. We're going to use this to uncover the buried beliefs that shape our thinking. First, identify your core assumptions. These are the fundamental beliefs that you take for granted about how the world works. For example, if you believe that hard work always leads to success, that's an assumption. If you believe that people are generally good or generally selfish, those are also assumptions. If you believe that certain institutions are trustworthy or untrustworthy, yes, guess what? Those are also assumptions too. Second, trace the origin story. Where did these assumptions come from? Was it something that your parents taught you, a book you read in college, a personal experience that shaped your worldview? Often we discover that our most strongly held beliefs trace back to very limited sources or experiences. Third, stress test your assumptions. Ask yourself, what would have to be true for this assumption to be wrong? To be clear, this isn't about abandoning your beliefs. This is about understanding their limits. Every assumption has boundaries where it stops being useful or accurate. Here's why this matters so much for creating a kinder world. When we examine our assumptions, we realize how many of our beliefs are provisional rather than absolute. This has the power to make us more curious about people who disagree with us rather than being dismissive. The kindness connection here is crucial. When we examine how we form our opinions, we become more curious towards people who hold different views. Instead of thinking, how can they be so stupid? We start thinking, I wonder what information experiences led them to that conclusion. This shift in thinking is revolutionary. It moves us from judgment to curiosity, from dismissal to dialogue, from contempt to connection. So for the second kind of strategy of the episode, this week, I want you to pick one opinion that you hold strongly about a current issue. It could be politics, social justice, workplace policy, parenting, whatever feels important to you. Now do an assumption audit. As a reminder, first, identify your core assumption about that issue that you chose. Second, trace the origin story. In other words, where do your assumptions about that issue come from? And third, stress test your assumptions by asking yourself, what would have to be true for my assumption to be wrong? After you've completed the assumption audit, now we're going to get to the real work. It's time to truly flex your critical thinking muscles by asking yourself these 4 challenging questions. 1, did I seek out perspectives that disagreed with my initial instinct on the issue? 2, are my sources diverse in terms of viewpoint, background, and expertise? 3, how much of my opinion is based on actual evidence versus emotional reaction? And 4, what would someone who disagrees with me say about my sources? This isn't about changing your mind or abandoning your beliefs. It's about understanding the foundation that they're built on. Sometimes you'll discover that your opinions are well-founded and thoroughly researched. Props given. Other times you're going to realize that you might need to do more homework. Either way, you'll walk away as a more advanced critical thinker and ideally with a deeper appreciation for how challenging it is to form well-reasoned beliefs in a very complex world. Hey, fellow kindness extremists, it's me, Shola. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, if you're mowing what I'm growing, if you're smelling what I'm stepping in. Okay, I'll stop. If you're enjoying what you're listening to so far, I would love it if you would take a moment to hit the subscribe button and leave a rating and a review. Those incredibly kind acts go so far in helping me to reach as many people as possible who will join the movement to actively create a kinder world. I appreciate you so much, my friend. Okay, let's get back to the episode. To recap, I've talked about being intellectually humble and questioning our assumptions. Now we need to talk about logical fallacies, those sneaky little errors in reasoning that derail productive conversations and lead us so far away from the truth. Logical fallacies, by definition, are arguments that may sound strong or convincing on the surface, but upon deeper scrutiny and with the application of critical thinking, can be proven invalid because of their faulty logic. Now, before I dive in, let me be clear about something. Learning about logical fallacies isn't about becoming the conversation police or showing off how smart you are. It's about protecting yourself from manipulation and ensuring that your own arguments are built on solid ground. So think of logical fallacies as intellectual viruses, and just like biological viruses, they spread rapidly through communities, infecting conversations and corrupting our ability to think critically. There are a ton of logical fallacies out there, and it would take me hours to go through all of them. If you're interested in going deeper on this, I highly recommend that you check out my book, Civil Unity. However, for now though, let me share 5 of the most common ones that you'll encounter. First is the ad hominem fallacy. That's when someone attacks the person making an argument instead of addressing the argument itself. For example, if someone said, "You think we should increase the funding for schools? Well, guess what, buddy? You dropped out of college. Your opinion doesn't matter." See what happened there? So instead of engaging with the education funding argument, they attack the person's credentials. Second is the straw man fallacy. That's when someone misrepresents your argument to make it so much easier to attack. So if you were to say, "You know what? I think we need stricter safety regulations for amusement parks." And the person responds by saying, "So let me get this straight. You want to eliminate all fun from childhood and turn kids into bubble wrap prisoners. Is that right?" That is a straw man. They're not arguing against their actual position. They're arguing against a distorted version that they made up. Third is the false dilemma fallacy, which reduces complex issues into only 2 options when so many more possibilities exist. For example, either you support this policy completely or you hate America. Really? Those are the only 2 options available to me? Obviously, very few things can be simplified into a binary choice. Fourth is the appeal to authority fallacy, which uses somebody's credentials or status as the sole basis for accepting their argument, especially when they're not actually an expert in the relevant field. For example, "So my favorite celebrity says that this supplement will cure cancer and they're so successful, so it must be true." In this case, this is a huge fallacy because success in entertainment doesn't equal expertise in medicine. The 5th one, and maybe the most annoying one, is the burden of proof fallacy, when someone makes a claim and then demands that you disprove it instead of them providing evidence on their own. "Yo, son, Bigfoot exists, and if you can't prove that he doesn't, then my theory is correct. What?" Okay, so that's not how evidence works. There's so many more examples I could give, and I encourage you to check out my book, Civil Unity, if you want to learn more. But here's where this gets tricky. Most people don't use logical fallacies intentionally. It's not like they're sitting in dark rooms, twisting their imaginary mustaches, plotting to deceive us with their faulty reasoning. Usually, they're just trying to make their point in the most persuasive way possible, and they fall into these logical traps without even realizing it. This is why approaching logical fallacies with kindness is so important. When someone uses faulty reasoning, our goal shouldn't be to shame them or humiliate them or prove how smart we are. Our goal should be to get closer to the truth. In my book, Civil Unity, I developed what I call the HIT approach, HIT, for dealing with logical fallacies. The H is for how do you know that? This is the gentlest entry point. So instead of immediately pointing out the fallacy, start with curiosity. For example, you could say, "That's interesting. How did you come to that conclusion?" This gives the person a chance to clarify their thinking, and it might reveal that they actually have better reasoning than their initial statement suggested, or not. We'll find out together. The I is for identify the fallacy. If their reasoning is indeed flawed, you can gently point out the logical error. For example, "I noticed that instead of addressing my argument about the school funding, you focus on my educational background. Can we talk about the actual policy proposal?" The T is for test their argument. This is where you invite them to examine their reasoning a little bit more carefully. For example, you could say, "If having a college degree is necessary to have opinions about education policy, would that mean that parents without college degrees shouldn't have a say in their children's schooling?" The key is to approach this process with genuine curiosity and respect. You're not trying to destroy their argument. You're trying to build a better one together. And here's the final kind of strategy of the episode. For the next week, I want you to become a logical fallacy detective. But here's the twist. Don't focus on other people's logical fallacies. Focus on your own. Keep a small notebook or use your phone to track moments when you catch yourself using faulty reasoning. Call it your Fallacy Journal. Maybe you realize you dismissed someone's argument because you don't like them personally. That's an ad hominem attack. Remember that. Or maybe you caught yourself oversimplifying a complex issue into an either-or choice. That's a false dilemma fallacy, as mentioned. Maybe you found yourself repeating something you heard without checking it to see if it's actually true. That's an appeal to authority fallacy. You get where I'm going with this. This practice will do 2 things. First, it'll make you a better critical thinker by helping you recognize and correct your own logical errors. And second, it will make you more compassionate when you encounter fallacies in other people's arguments, because you will remember, hopefully and ideally, how easy it is to fall into these traps yourself. At the end of the week, review your journal, look for patterns. Are there certain fallacies that you tend to use more often than others? Are there specific topics or emotional states that make you more likely to use faulty reasoning? This self-awareness is a gift and it will transform how you engage in difficult conversations. Instead of being the person who smugly points out everyone else's logical errors, you'll become the person who models good reasoning and helps others to think more critically. And trust me, the world needs a heck of a lot more of that right now. My friend, we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about intellectual humility, questioning our assumptions, and identifying logical fallacies. But I want to leave you with a bigger picture of why this matters. Critical thinking isn't just about being smarter or winning arguments. It's about creating the conditions for genuine human connection in a world that seems determined to tear us apart. When we approach disagreements with intellectual humility, we create space for learning and growth. When we question our assumptions, we become more open to other people's perspectives. And when we identify logical fallacies, especially our own, we build arguments on firmer ground and engage with others more fairly. This is kindness in action, not the superficial niceness that avoids difficult conversations, but the real kindness that seeks truth and understanding, even when it's uncomfortable. The world needs more people who can think critically while remaining compassionate, who can hold strong convictions while staying open to new information, and who can engage in difficult conversations without demonizing those who disagree with them. Most of all, the world needs more kindness extremists who understand that better thinking leads to better relationships, and better relationships lead to a better world. So again, here are your homework assignments for this week. First, practice the daily doubt exercise. Secondly, conduct an assumption audit on one of your really strong opinions. And third, keep a fallacy journal focused on your own reasoning patterns. Remember, the goal isn't perfection. That's wild. We're not here for that. The goal is progress. Every time you pause to question your own thinking, every time you approach a disagreement with curiosity instead of certainty, every time you catch yourself using faulty reasoning and you choose to correct course, you're doing the hard work of critical thinking and healing our divided world. This isn't easy work, but it's necessary work. And I believe in your ability to do it because if you listen this far to this episode, you're already committed to creating a kinder world. Thank you for taking the journey with me today. Thank you for being willing to examine your own thinking instead of criticizing everyone else's like everyone else does. And thank you for understanding that true kindness sometimes requires us to think harder, not softer. This is your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa, and you now know that kindness can't be weak because you just experienced the strength of the Kindness Extremist Podcast. Until next time, my friend, the journey to a kinder world continues. Thank you for listening to the Kindness Extremist Podcast. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. And I have one favor to ask you. If you could kindly hit the subscribe button, leave a rating and a review, not only would that be incredibly kind, but by doing so, you're actively playing a role in growing this movement and ideally getting us one step closer to creating a kinder world. I hope to see you next week for another episode of the Kindness Extremist Podcast. Bye for now.